the nadir of the papacy as it has occurred at this council, because it excommunicated Pope Vigilius, and the same Pope repented, blamed his doctrinal errors on Satan, and accepted a council whose decree endorsed the consensus-based ecclesiastical model of the church. So pretty much everything that John and I disagree about is summed up by this one council. Now, Vigilius certainly advanced high papal rhetoric, where interestingly didn't come up in John's presentation. So I will quote Vigilius being at his most papal. In an excommunication letter, Pope Vigilius identifies himself as, quote him, the Papal in Conciliar II, Volume 1, page 163. Containing, he speaks of himself, the role and authority of the blessed Peter the Apostle, page 164. He decreed that those who disagreed with him, to quote him in the same letter, are stripped both of priestly dignity and Catholic communion, and that they may recover your rank through the mercifulness of either myself or after my death, my successor. I mean, come on, let's be honest. Taken at face value, this seems to say that Rome has the highest rank and can unilaterally decide who is Catholic and who is not. But the proceeding is not accurate. Why? Because Vigilius expounded the consensus-based ecclesiology of the church. Now, his resistance to Justinian's edict preceding Constantinople II in the same letter was voiced as follows. He said that things are being transacted, to quote him, without resolution by the council. In Dum in Sancte Euphemiae, which I'm sure John pronounces much better than I do, it's written, as it identifies itself, by Vigilius, Bishop of the Holy Catholic Church of the City of Rome to the whole people of God. Same book, page 170. Something later Roman Catholic theology calls an ex cathedra pronouncement. He identifies that Justinian and everyone else is, quoting him, obliged to wait for a common resolution, this ex cathedra letter, and they were suspended as transgressors and were excluded from communion with the see of the blessed Apostle Peter, which, page 171, which he identifies, page 172, as our communion in this ex cathedra letter. Now, this means he viewed excommunications as local, not binding, our communion, specifically the see of the blessed Apostle Peter. Right? So we let him explain himself. He's taken a view consistent with the consensus-based model of the church. Now you go, oh, well, you're taking too much from his words. Well, we got a contemporary source that tells us how they interpret the same words. It's the letter of the Church of Milan to the Frankish envoys, written contemporarily with the preceding documents, and it literally delineates which local communion those who opposed Vigilius were excluded from. I'm going to quote the letter. Right, page 168, same book. The most blessed Pope Vigilius admonished all the bishops in the following words. Whoever agrees to give the edict of Justinian his assent is to know that he is suspended from the communion of the Apostolic See. The holy Dacian of Milan also gave his testimony before all when he exclaimed loudly, mark that both myself and all the priests of the region which my church belongs, that is Gaul, Burgundy, Spain, Liguria, Aemilia, and Venetia, that's from Spain to Italy, guys, attest that whoever assents to the edict of Justinian will be excluded from communion with the bishops of the above-mentioned provinces. So it doesn't get any clearer that these are local excommunications. Not my opinion. This is what the sources explicitly state. Now, Vigilius' opposition was based upon the authority of his see and, to quote him, page 171, the ecclesiastical canons, not citing that his prerogatives are sourced irrespective to the canons. Now, that sounds like a boring point, but it makes much more sense as the centuries go on, because Rome will later not make that claim. Now, Vigilius' first constitutum, likewise, which was a counter-council against the ecumenical council, specified, the quote it, volume 2, page 146, same book, that whatever was affirmed orthodox in those places by common consent with the legates, we revere and accept as orthodox without revision or alteration. So what is the Roman criteria according to another ex cathedra statement about what an ecumenical council is? Common consent, as long as the Roman legates are also involved. Not my words, Pope Vigilius' words, an ex cathedra statement. It should also be noted that the same document defended the heretical 3 chapters as not heretical. A clear example of a pope teaching heresy. All right? And you go, well, Craig, you just quoted it teaching common consent and it teaching something heretical. That how could you use it as a proof text? Because I don't believe in papal infallibility. I'm just saying, if you do, you have to now accept what this document states. Now, in sum, even at its most papal, Vigilius' excommunications were entirely local in nature, just like Victor's centuries beforehand. And the ecclesiology he was expounding was explicitly consensus-based. Additionally, he defended the heretical 3 chapters. These are all relevant when we talk about the history of the papacy. Now, backtracking his own demands, Vigilius refused to attend the ecumenical council, right? Remember he said he wanted a council, then he refused to go. Vigilius was that sort of character. Now, what did the council, how did they respond? The council responded by 1, excommunicating him, and 2, teaching consensus-based ecclesiology so as to delineate that the Pope must take correction from the council. All right, I'm going to quote the council, session 7. All right, this is in Price, Acts of the Council, volume 2, pages 99 and 101, because it's pretty long, so this is how I condense it. The Holy Council said, may the sacred decree be duly received and read. They read the decree of Justinian. They say, we have pronounced that his name, Vigilius, is alien to Christians, is not read out in the sacred diptychs. The Holy Council said, what has now seemed good, let us therefore preserve unity with the Apostolic See of the Sacrosanct Church of the Elder Rome, transacting everything according to the tenor of the text, i.e. the decree that just deposed Vigilius, that have been read. Now, to quote Colarafi and Butler, so it's not just my opinion that removing from the diptychs is an excommunication. This is in Keys, 2004, page 130. When the church named a person in the diptychs, she professed her communion with that individual. So what does it mean when they don't pronounce her name in the diptychs? That they're not in communion with that individual. What's that called? Excommunication. Hence, Pope Vigilius himself was literally excommunicated, but not the Roman Synod itself, whose consent with the other synods to the council was necessary for it to establish consensus. The idea was if Vigilius would not recant, he, like this deposed predecessor, Pope Silverius, he would simply be replaced with someone more manipulable, right? Because they did it in the past, why wouldn't you just go do it again? Now, 2. The same session purposely read a slew of documents showing that Vigilius had previously affirmed the denunciation of the 3 chapters, intending to demonstrate that Rome had already consented in advance to the work of the council. Why else do this? Nicaea too, by the way, did the same thing in session 3 concerning a previous synodical decree of the Oriental Patriarchs, because of the controversy of whether or not those 2 legates that did come were representing a local standing synods. All right, so this is not the last time an ecumenical council would do the same thing. Now, the preceding consensus-based approach to ecclesiology was explicitly dogmatized in the council sentence. So John in his presentation saying, well, Rome accepted this abrogated version of the minutes of the council, which means Rome didn't accept the deposition of Vigilius. Not only did we have future Western documents that call Vigilius a heretic, so that's not the issue. The reality is that the longer version of the minutes, the one that include the deposition, it's the only manuscript, and it's in Latin. It's the only extant manuscript of this council. The other manuscript that's shortened was lost. It's lost. And so we just have to trust that all that stuff really is left out. They found fragments of the lost manuscript, but honestly, until we have the critical editions in front of us, I can't vouch for the fact that it actually totally aligns in the excommunication section. Now, that being said, what do we know for sure? That both traditions, if we accept them, of these minutes include the Conciliar Decree. And what's the Conciliar Decree say? It says this: Vigilius was staying, now remember, no title for Vigilius, just says Vigilius. Vigilius was staying in this imperial city and ought to have taken part. Our most pious emperor urged both Vigilius and ourselves to meet together since it is appropriate for priests to oppose a common solution. We recall to his memory the great example of the apostles and the traditions of the fathers. For even though individual apostles abounded with the grace of the Holy Spirit, so that they did not need the advice of others, they met together and each of them confirmed his statements from the testimonies of the divine scriptures. Just so you know, guys, this is an ecumenical council saying that you need the divine scriptures to teach doctrine. It's not that doctrine and scriptures are totally divorced from one another. The decree continues. The Holy Fathers also, who convened at various times in the Holy Four Councils, followed the ancient precedent. Again, it shows that the ecumenical councils merely followed the apostles in teaching what the scriptures teach. Now it continues. Since it is certain that it is through joint examination, when there is expounded what needs to be discussed on both sides, that the light of truth dispels the darkness of lies. For neither is it permissible in the case of faith for anyone to anticipate the judgment of the church in her totality. Right? So no person without joint examination could make a judgment for the church. This is in the decree of the Fifth Ecumenical Council. All right? And that same decree did not identify Vigilius as bishop, which to everyone, because every bishop in ecumenical council has a title, shows his deposition. So in both conciliar documents, Vigilius' deposition is part of what was accepted by the Roman Church. Take that to the bank. This is not by mistake. Now also, the joint examination or consensus is non-negotiable, right? This decree says this is the only way it happens. And so the idea that any individual can make a singular judgment for the church, like Vigilius did in the First Constitutum, which is why they were writing this, is disallowed. So they were literally actually contradicting Vigilius in anticipation that his statement in the First Constitutum would be the binding statement. They say, no, that's disallowed. That's what the decree teaches, and that's what all the churches, including Rome, accepted when they accepted this council. Now, Vigilius and the Roman Synods acceptance of the Conciliar Decree means this must be dogma in their church if they're consistent. Now, Vigilius capitulated and blamed. So it gets better than this. You think like all this is just, wow, this is really the Orthodox side really fighting back. It actually gets crazier. Vigilius capitulated. He repents. He's going to accept this council. But why? He blames, to quote Vigilius, in the letter to Eutychius, pages 215 and page 218 of the volume 2, the enemy of the human race, that's Satan, for deceiving him, right, into writing against the 3 chapters. So he says, yeah, Satan deceived me. That's why I wrote something heretical. And then he annulled the First Constitutum by the authority of our present letter. Right? So now he annuls his previous ex cathedra statement. Now, for over a century, the council lacked reception in parts of the West, because obviously this is such a mess. Right? So despite papal ratification, right, if the West, if you say, oh, it's an Eastern Council and they didn't have this high papal view, well, why did the whole Western Church lack this high papal view? The Pope accepted the council, they didn't. In fact, the Council of Toledo in 653 and 684, that much later, over 100 years later, and they were in communion with Rome, failed to recognize this council. All right? And so that is my passionate presentation of the Fifth Ecumenical Council and the events surrounding it.